All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Explainer of Mysteries here, and today I decided to talk about the astrological transits today as of May 2nd, 2026. So let's take a look at it. Now, I had just downloaded this chart, so if I sound a little slow at trying to first look at this chart and using a lot of fillers, I do apologize in advance. However, we do notice some things right off the bat. So, we have Jupiter in the second decan of Cancer and the moon in the third decan of Scorpio. That would mean that is the Cancer decan of Scorpio. In other words, that is the lunar decan of Scorpio that the moon is in. And with Jupiter, we are in the second decan of Cancer, so that is the martial decan of Cancer. Now, with that being said, the third decan of Scorpio is kind of like the hero that needs a villain. And I know that the time is off. It is actually 5:53 p.m. where I'm at, but I decided I guess we're just using 0 degrees north and 0 degrees east for the coordinates. So that would be the global time that is for the entire world of ours, planet Earth, Malkut. Now, the thing about Scorpio and Cancer is that the third decan of Scorpio is, like I said before, the hero that needs the villain. Now, we're not going to pay too much attention to this because it is the moon, and the moon can traverse a sign very quickly. The moon goes through the entire chart in like 28 days, so, But we did start off this month, May 1st, with the moon in Scorpio, which the moon is in fall in Scorpio. Now, I know that I'm breathing kind of hard, but I did just get back from a walk. We also see that Saturn is in Aries. We see quite a few planets in Aries. In fact, during May 1st, Mercury was in the sign of Aries as well. So we got a lot going on in Aries, which seems to represent what we got going on now. We're gonna have the warehouse fires. We have a lot of, another failed attempt on the President of the United States. I've said before, and many other, practitioners and other channels, I know Frederick Xavier mentioned this, that, Trump just has a way of deflecting anything that comes his way. Now, I sense that, Trump had some ideas that maybe he was trying to broker a peace deal, and somebody didn't want that, so they decided to send him a message. Just a not so gentle reminder, but a reminder nonetheless. Now, if we look at the North Node is, well, it's retrograde as, often is. It's retrograde in the sign of Pisces. The first decan of Pisces. That's the most Piscean decan. So we got a lot of Neptune themes going on. Pisces and Aries. Well, Aries represents action, movement, decisive action. Aries doesn't think before acting. Aries doesn't have to think before acting. Aries can be a little bit self-centered and self-assured, self-righteous. Think of the word self. That's the big hint for Aries. It's self. And now we're seeing that, well, the opposite, the collective, is starting to break. We're seeing the warehouse fires. We're seeing a lot of attacks. Now, if we're looking at the aspects, to which I have listed below, it's not showing in the screen, Well, Jupiter's trine the moon, which I've already mentioned, and we have Mars square Jupiter. That can be a bit of, that's a fight. Mars is destroying, Jupiter is expanding. Jupiter adds fuel to the fire of Mars. Jupiter also protects against Mars. In fact, Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, that's where Jupiter is exalted, because Cancer represents the home, and Jupiter has to protect. Now, Cancer, this is the deacon of Scorpio. Scorpio is all about revenge, getting even, making people pay for things. But the thing is, in order for there to be revenge, there has to be an injustice. There has to be something done that would be, give some kind of justification for revenge. Now, mind you, I think that should just be left up to the divine. And I really do promote that on here, because I've tried to get revenge before. I didn't even act on it. Now just thinking about it, planning it out, dwelling on it, that was enough to, throw some monkey wrenches into my life. Now, as for Saturn and Aries, we all know how that, turns out. We have Venus in Gemini, Venus in Gemini. And we got the Sun in Taurus. Well, we have Pluto square, 2 planets, Sun and Mercury. Pluto is in Aquarius. Aquarius is all about freedom. In fact, Aquarius is very much anti-Saturnian. But in order for Aquarius to gain freedom, Aquarius has to play within Saturn's bounds, within the circumstances of Saturn. See, Saturn doesn't threaten you or punish you. Saturn simply takes away. Saturn represents circumstances and boundaries. So Saturn can very well represent a circumstance that would put one in a position to where they feel that they have to do something unorthodox, Aquarius, to do something that may not make sense to others, also Aquarius. Pluto's in the first decan of Aquarius. So that's Aquarius, Aquarius. And as for Venus in Gemini, well, Venus is in the second decan of Gemini. That represents Libra. That's the Venusian decan of Gemini. In fact, we see quite a few planets in the decans, respective decans of themselves. Venus is in the second decan of Gemini, that's the Venusian decan, and Moon is in the third decan of Scorpio, that's the lunar decan of Scorpio. We also see that Mars is in the Jovian, the solar decan, the solar decan of Aries. And we see that the Sun is in the mercurial sign, the mercurial decan of Taurus. That's the Virgo decan of Taurus. And we see that Mercury is in the Jovian decan of Aries. Aries is that Sun exalted in Aries. Now, mind you, Mercury is in the third decan, but, we're seeing some conflicts play out. We're also seeing them work together. The Sun is in the mercurial decan of Taurus, Venus's sign, and Mercury is in the Jovian sign of the solar exaltation, Aries. Now, if we look at Sagittarius, we'll notice that Lilith is in the second decan of Sagittarius. That's Aries, the Martian decan of Sagittarius. So, looking at the chart, we can see that there's a lot of conflict going on with all the stuff going on in Aries, especially with Saturn, Mars, and Neptune in Aries. That's very volatile. Very, very volatile. Well, 2026 is not a boring year indeed. In fact, this entire decade has not been boring. It's been anything but boring. Might be painful, but, for some people, boredom is just as painful, if not more painful, than constant change and upheaval and pain, physically, financially, emotionally. In so many ways, pain can manifest. And pain is very subjective. We're looking at Aquarius. Aquarius is all about the self. Well, Aquarius is anti-Saturn. It's breaking free of Saturn. So we can see that there's a lot of pressure on Saturn. Saturn represents the law. Saturn represents, the ruling class. Saturn represents limitations and restrictions. And you can see with the riots, with the wars, with, the arson attacks, with the attacks on scientists, we can see, the struggle. In fact, right now, Saturn is sextile Venus. So there's a little bit of cooperation here. However, Venus is in the, Venusian decan of Gemini. Well, that's also where Saturn is exalted in Libra. In fact, Saturn is in fall right now. Mars is in rulership. The Sun, the Sun's doing okay in Taurus, but, that's where the Moon is exalted. That's not where the Sun is exalted. The Sun is exalted in Aries. And so it's easy to see, the reflection of what's all been going on lately. And if we look at the mercurial decan of Taurus, Virgo, we can see that the south node is opposite the north node, as it always is. The south node is in the first decan of Virgo. That's Virgo. Yeah, so that's kind of, the past. It's believed by many, and I believe it as well, that, the south node represents the past life. So there you go for this one. Enjoy, and may this spiritual protection help you, because that's what this is about. This channel is about spiritual growth and protection, making the right decisions, and more so, importantly, thinking the right way. And that'll be about it. We'll see each other next time.